Hi, I'm Stephen Padilla, Director of USBC Coaching. I'm here today with Lou Marquez, USBC Goal Coach and Assistant Coach for Lawrence Tech University. We're here at Bowling IQ. We've got a great facility, Lou. Tell us a little bit about where we are and give us some information about what the building is.
Well, Bowling IQ is a very unique facility. It houses two great businesses inside of it. The Delora Brothers Warehouse and Supplier for all pro shop equipment, proprietary equipment, bowling center equipment for the Midwest and eastern parts of the states, and the Metro Detroit Bowling and Resource Center. That's the educational side of this facility. Here we train bowlers from all facets, from entry level to beginner bowler to advanced seasonal tour, player, as well as house our training facility for the Lawrence Tech University bowling team, men's and women's programs. So great facility for anybody who wants to come in and learn anything about bowling. Great.
Glad to have use of this facility. Now, we're going to focus specifically on lane play, though. You and I were talking, we want to do some information, give you some detail about lane play. Some information about what lane transition looks like, maybe how to adapt and adjust to that. So when we get into what lane play and transitions are, what are we kind of looking at when we talk about lane play or lane transition?
Well, lane play is a lot of things to a lot of different people, depending on the level of bowler that we're at. But what it really is, the science of understanding the changes that progress on the lane when we're immersed in this environment. We know as a bowler, whether you're an open play bowler or a league bowler or a tournament bowler, lane play could be just those subtle nuances that we make adjustments with to understanding equipment changes or matching up our physical game to the oil environment or making moves based on pinfall. There's a lot of science that goes on to adapting to this invisible environment. It's the only sport, think about it, that's the only sport where the playing field is totally invisible.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, honestly. We're going to talk about ball motion. We'll talk about some adjustments that the game that players can make. There's going to be plenty of things that when we dig into it that we'll see are opportunities or options for different levels of players to adjust to. So let's get started. Let's talk about lane play and adjustments. Let's get moving and understand a little bit more on how to make your game a little bit stronger. Okay, so we have a variety of player out there. It doesn't matter if you're 3-step, 4-step, whatever type of approach or timing you've got. There's infinite number of ways you can get it done behind the foul line. But what that does is really translates what they do onto the approach, onto the lane. So in getting what they do onto the lane, let's talk briefly about what is out here on the lane and then maybe what the ball transition goes through, maybe the phases of motion. Tell us a little bit about what we're actually standing on and what we could see out here.
Well, in the front section of the lane, where we look at the energy release from the bowler style, this area here kind of controls what happens in what we call the skid phase of the ball's energy. It's that area just beyond the foul line and up to about the areas of the arrows. And what it does, it linearly controls the directional path of the ball.
Okay. So the initial force that a bowler puts into the shot initially comes in contact with the front part of the lane. So that 15-20 foot area is going to be the skid area for ball motion. What happens next?
Well, as the ball travels down the lane and it starts to pick up energy and pick up friction from the ball getting deeper and deeper into contact with the lane environment, that surface underneath has a certain texture, certain friction. So that bowling ball is going to try to unleash that energy. And as it unleashes that energy, it then starts to change direction and starts to get into what we call a hook phase.
Okay, so the hook phase is going to be the mid part of the lane. So with the ball's hydroplaning through the front, we get into a hook phase in the middle part. What happens as it gets toward the pins?
As it starts getting to the pins and the ball starts exiting through the end of that oil line, it then starts to get into a roll phase. And it starts facing itself up and try to get into the right happy roll so it can start entering to that pin deck and start hopefully getting to the pocket.
So we got skid in the front, we've got hook in the mid lane, then we've got roll in the back part of the lane. All three of those phases of ball motion are pretty important, obviously, to getting the right kind of pin carry. And the bowler's motion, what they do physically on the approach, is going to be affected by those three phases of what happens on the lane, if the bowler's ball gets into those phases or not. So when we talk about the overall transition of what a bowler gives to the ball and the lane, ideally that skid, hook, and roll phase are what we're looking for to get good pin action and get good carry, and ultimately tell the bowler what they need to do.
Absolutely. Their physical games kind of create certain habits or certain environments where they're really comfortable. And depending on where they're interacting with that lane could determine, the overall outcome. Like if you're a speed dominant player, chances are they're going to be playing more right of the ball track or in the ball track. And that's the most worn part of the lane in any bowling center, whether it be synthetic or wood or different types of synthetic, or if they're, let's say, heavy red dominant, like the two-handers nowadays. You see the Belmonte and the Askews kind of revving it up. They tend to be more diagonal across the front part of the lane. So their physical ability really determines what's going to happen during the process of lane play.
It's going to change that environment. It's going to affect how they transition, how they move. So putting those pieces together is really the essence of what we're talking about when we talk about transition and lane play.
Absolutely.
Okay, Lou, Blake's throwing a shot here. Tell us what we're seeing when this ball gets on the lane.
Well, the speed that he creates with his physical game, his energy that he's going to release and his rev rate are going to create that first initial energy release into the lane. We call that the skid phase. So as he gets ready to release this ball, what you'll see is the ball transition straight along through the front part of the lane. You'll see we taped up his bowling ball and you'll see his axis being held tight. And then you'll see the energy of that ball start to release as it gets through the mid lane and then the back end, start to get into its roll phase.
So the axis is going to change position, and then we're going to see each of those phases as the ball goes down the lane, so we'll see the skid, hook, and roll based on what that axis point looks like.
Yes.
Okay, Lou, so we see what the bowler's just given the lane. They've given a shot to the lane, and it's got energy, and it's got speed, and it's got a lot of factors to it. Now the lane takes over. The lane's going to have a lot of things it's going to do to the ball as it goes through. And let's start in the skid phase. What's happening to the ball and the lane when you get into the skid phase?
Well, in the skid phase, the ball's actually impacting the front part of the lane. That's where it has its most miles per hour. It's the fastest. But as it starts to transition into this lane, it's trying to travel to the heaviest concentration of oil, right. Big volume of oil, big conditioner. It helps to protect that oil and that bowling ball to cushion it so that it can store up some energy. Now, as it starts to release that energy, it starts to travel then a little bit further down the lane, and the friction in the lane starts to take over. You gotta remember, we're a game of the energy of the bowler, and now the energy of the lane starting to take over. So we're always in this constant battle of back and forth energies. So that's what's happening.
So now we're at the mercy of the lane with the skid phase. And with that phase, like I said, the ball speed's slowing down and the ball's starting to change its directions. We're seeing some depletion of the oil through the front part of the lane. We get to the hook phase now. So now the ball's going to start to do something a little different and the lane's going to change differently. What's happening?
It's starting to flare. That drilling style, that option that you and your pro shop operator had in the idea of how do you want to see this ball move, is starting to really take over. That's where the weight block and all the engineering that goes into it starts gyrating, and the revolutions that you impart and the speed that you impart starting to take over, and it's trying to change the dynamics of that ball as it's traveling. So we start getting further and further down the lane, and you start seeing depletion from the lane oil. Oil starts to get a little thinner as we go, and that starts interacting with how this ball is going to slow down on the lane.
Okay, so it's going to slow down in the hook phase. We're going to see a change of direction for sure. Now we get to the last part of the lane. Now we're looking at the roll phase of ball motion. So what's happening to the ball and the lane there?
Well, the ball is actually now it's at its point where even though it's revving quickly, you see it spinning quickly, it's actually at its slowest part. And what you're looking for is the ball to right itself up. It's actually getting into what we call the happy, spinning gyration, happy roll. But it's rolling now. And we want that happening well before that end of that oil line. If we go beyond it, serious trouble if we go beyond that. Too much energy, too much violent reaction, or maybe not enough. So we want to be in control in that section right before the end of the oil line. And hopefully 10 in the pit is the end result.
That's the idea. Hopefully we go through all three of those phases of ball motion, and the bowler gets a lot of information from that. If you're used to seeing ball motion and then reacting to what you see, it becomes easier to learn what your adjustments need to be. So ultimately, when you talk about ball motion and what's going on out here, after you've let go of it, that lane's taking it over, so there's going to be a lot of results that you need to observe and watch to make your adjustments down the road.
Yeah, one of the most important things, too, from a bowler's perspective is that while they're interacting with the lane oil, there's so many other people also interacting with it, and they have a determination of what's going to happen. It's not just them. If a bowler never really moves or adjusts, and we know what the game looks like, it's not necessarily consistent. But if you're interacting with it, as this environment's ever changing, your scores are going to stay maintained pretty well.
Okay, so the lane we know is going to transition, and the second indicator of the lane transitioning, though, is what the ball's doing through the pins. As a bowler, we still need to keep aware of that. So what kind of things can we see if the ball's getting to the pocket but not quite giving us the right result?
Well, great ball motion, you're going to have a certain look. That ball's going to transition. It enters that 1-3 pocket for a right-hander, 1-2 pocket for a left-hander, and it exits right off the pin deck at the back. That's a great ball reaction. Shouldn't have to move, shouldn't have to make any adjustments. But when we start seeing those light pocket hits, you're going to see the ball reacting more to the right side. Enters the 1-3, maybe light, and you see it deflect to the right side. Those are where the clues of the light pocket, the 10-pin, the 2-pin, the 2-4-5, the bucket, those primary leaves that, we take, some thought into, do I make an adjustment? Do I throw it better? It's time. The lane is transitioning, it's time.
So those light pocket hits where the ball goes a little bit too far to the right for that right-handed player are going to indicate there's time to make an adjustment. What if the ball's going to go the other direction, though? What if it's going to go too heavy?
Well, if it's going too heavy, we're going to have to obviously make an adjustment, but the clue is really watching where it's going through the pin deck. We're watching it exit, maybe left of the 5, or behind the 9, or behind the 8, I'm sorry. And you obviously, the leaves are going to be the 4-pin, the, 4-9, those heavy shots, or even a split.
Yeah, it could be the ultimate penalty when it comes to too high on the pocket. The splits are going to get in the way if the score is being pretty high. Yeah. But there's plenty of physical game adjustments, though, once we get an identification of what the lane's doing and the pins are doing that we can make that'll help increase our scores and increase our averages, right?
Right. And those adjustments are going to be the principal ones, really the simple ones. A little left or right on the approach. Those are the basic ones. We learn that as a bowler. Maybe some equipment changes. It's time. We'll look into our bag, see another ball reaction that we're looking for that maybe can travel a little bit further and react a little later. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe we want that reaction a little sooner. We're always looking for something to interact with that lane energy. That's changing. We need to change.
Yeah. So as our lane changes, we have to change, obviously. And having the right kind of tools are going to help us increase our chances of making the correct change at the right time, which is going to ultimately increase our scores.
Yeah.
Okay, Lou, so we know the lanes are going to transition. We know that as a player, we're going to have some adjustments in our toolbox. We need to know when to do these kind of things. What kind of indicators can give us heads up about when we should make adjustments?
Well, the first indicator you're looking for is from that location that you started on is that one clue. Ball starts either reading too soon or just revving up a little prematurely, going up high. It's an indicator that the lane's drying up. The environment around you and the people bowling in that similar area are slowly drying up the area on the lane. Mm-hmm. It's depleting. Right. The oil volume's getting less and less. Mm-hmm. So that's an indicator right there. Right. Also, you might notice that you start ringing some 10-pins. Mm-hmm. Pretty typical. You see the ball's reaction getting weaker and weaker. It can't climb the hill anymore, as we say. So that back-end response of that ball motion is just getting slower and slower. Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily what we consider, like people call carry down. It's actually the lane breaking down, and it's actually depleting the energy of the ball, and it's making it weaker, so it can't turn the corner anymore. So those are the clues that we would look for.
So that carry down you're talking about that we hear a lot of, people say, hey, it's carrying down, my ball's not recovering. That's the ball reading too soon on the lane. Possibly. It's picking up too much friction too soon, so it's not making it around that corner, so to speak. What kind of adjustments are bowler going to make to make that more successful?
Well, typically the first moves that we make is the lateral moves, the left to right moves. Mm-hmm. And usually what we want as a bowler, if we're a right-handed bowler, we want to chase that oil line in. We want to move in, closer to that inside part of the lane. We may be moving our feet, we may be moving our target, or both, a certain amount, depending on our versatility. Okay. Yeah. And then probably some speed adjustments. Those are typical. Great. As well.
So we got plenty of adjustments with our bowler. We got plenty of things happening. Every time a ball goes down the lane, we're going to see something happen different with the lane surface or with the adjustment needed. So ultimately, with the series of adjustments that our bowler's got to be on top of, with the ever-changing lanes from shot to shot, the game's constantly moving, and if you're not moving with it, you're not going to be successful.
Absolutely. And then as you move, you're also probably moving and changing some of those wrist positions, increasing the rotation of the ball, helping to store the energy so it can transcend through the lane longer through the front part of the lane, getting that longer skid phase, but then also that sharper back end reaction if we so need it.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be different for every player too. Obviously, we're not going to have the same amount of adjustment for one player to the next. It's going to vary based on the tool set your player's got. Some players are going to be stronger with their adjustments because they may have more revolutions on the ball when they let go of it. So as a player and as a coach, you kind of want to get an idea of what your player's tool set is, and then be able to adjust accordingly, because as those lanes change, they're not going to wait for you to actually catch up to them. You're going to have to go and get exactly what you need to be successful at that time.
Absolutely. If you're playing outside, maybe some of the adjustments that you make are more with the wrist cup or cockness, changing the energy of that ball motion. If you're more an inside type of player, you're going to find that rotation is probably a better move, as well as those fine-tuned adjustments on the lane.
So whether it's front and back on the approach, whether it's left and right, whether you're adjusting your hand one way or the other, you got to keep that tool set sharp, and you got to be successful, and you always want to be on top of what ever-changing lane conditions are going to do to your game.
It's called the tricks.
We
talk about it on tour. Tricks. People has tricks. You know, how do you develop those tricks? It's really understanding more about what we do and the science behind it, and what energy that creates from the physical game transcending onto the lane.
Great. Okay, Lou, here we've got Blake, and he's in a position where he's going to change his ball height and he's going to adjust his speed. Now, he's raised the ball in this case, and he's going to slow his ball speed down. When's he going to use this? Well,
he's going to use this when he necessarily needs to move into the oil. He's moving, in towards the center, and he's going into that heavier volume of oil. Definitely you need the ball to slow down through the front part because it's going to hydroplane. So we needed to match up to that back end reaction and get it to slow down at the right time so the ball can transition through its skid, hook, and roll phase.
All right, Lou, now Blake's going to change his ball position. He's going to lower the ball in this case. What's he looking to do here?
Well, he's looking to increase his ball speed. He might want to be able to play more linear, more front to back. Good for when you're playing shorter patterns, more aggressive sport conditions, or you're trying to play an area where it has more friction. You're trying to control that ball's dynamic and try to keep it more online to the pocket instead of actually going diagonally across the lane.
So possibly lower volume, shorter distances, you're going to lower the ball in the stance and get that ball much faster down the lane.
Absolutely. All those scenarios, you're trying to keep it straighter is greater.
Okay, Lou, now we see Blake's moving up on the approach. This is going to change his tempo a little bit. How's this going to affect when he needs to use it?
Well, it's going to, the tempo changes are going to affect his timing. It's going to change the length of his feet and the synchronization of the swing to it. So it's going to slow him down a little bit. Chances are we're going to use that more when we need to move in a little bit more, and we need to, or actually just slow the ball down, get it to read a little bit sooner, get it to face back up at the back end of the lane, and then make that good roll.
So possibly heavier volume patterns, maybe a little longer distances would match that moving up on the approach so that the tempo is slower.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that counteracts the volume, the speed of that ball, we want to get it slower. So moving up is definitely a key ingredient here. Changing of the tempo, changing of the rotation, all that good stuff.
All right, Lou, now Blake's going to move back on the approach. This is going to change his tempo. When's he going to use this, and what's going to do for his game?
Well, he's going to move back on the approach when he needs to actually try to control that front to back type of motion down lane. When the lane's drying up, you can use this as a tool to kind of keep the ball more online. Also, when you're playing shorter patterns, great scenario, keeping the ball more online, playing closer to that gutter, trying to keep it more linear.
So the shorter distance patterns, the lighter volumes maybe, even when a pattern starts to break down in a certain part of the lane, moving back on the approach is going to help give him the space he needs to increase his tempo, get faster ball speed.
Yes, absolutely. The most important thing is getting it through the front, getting it through the heads, but not trying to change the angles deep. We're trying to create that linear motion through the front to back.
Great. Okay, Coach, now Blake is moving to his right. He's starting to square up is what we call it. He's going to change his angle. He's going to change his, how he positions himself on the approach. What's he going to do with this, and then when's he going to use it?
Well, primarily we see this more to the outside part of the game. When we're starting off, maybe on the fresh part of the night, we want to play our angles more front to back and try to get that bigger angle from the outside part of the lane. We want to be squared up because when we're open, the ball may hydroplane to the right. You might swing it out to the right. For a right-hander. But for the most part, we're going to control that linear front-to-back motion with a nice squared-up approach, at the back here, and then be able to control that area.
So if I'm in league the fresh part of the night, whenever there's no need to try and open the lane up or swing the ball, squaring up with my body with my angle is going to give me a little more control overall in my shape of my shot.
Yes, absolutely.
Blake's now going to move and open his angles up a little more. He's going to change his shoulder position, his angle toward his target path. What's he trying to accomplish with this, and when's he going to use it?
Well, he's going to use that when we're trying to chase that oil line as it's depleting on the inside. But he's also going to try and go left to right, through the front part. So we're trying to create bigger angles through the lane. We're trying to, use these when we need to get the ball to a further right break point down the lane, and then get that energy to then change direction and have a steeper entry angle into the pocket.
So as the lane breaks down, depending on how many bowlers he's bowling with, he's going to need to move or inside and open up at different rates, obviously.
Absolutely, and keep on chasing it as that oil depletes. That's a big thing. And as you move left on the approach for a right-hander, these angles may even increase even more.
Okay, Coach, we've got Blake here. He's our model, and he's had some success in college bowling, doing well. He's got a lot of good tricks and tools. This is his A position. This is where he prefers to play. It's where he's found the most success in the pattern he's playing on today. Not a lot of variation to what he's going to do for his A game. He's most comfortable there. When does he use his A game?
He uses his A game to really find the comfort area on the lane when he's trying to match up. He's trying to match up maybe his favorite ball, or maybe a certain angle on the lane based on the forces of whatever that lane condition pattern is giving. But his A game is where he goes to. That's what he knows. Now, as it starts to change, that's when he starts adapting different types of releases and things like that.
So he's going to make his adjustments off of his A game, and from there he knows that's his starting point, that he's going to have options to speed up or slow down, or even change his hand position. All right, Coach, Blake's moved in on the lane a little bit, but he's changing his hand position to adjust how he's going to release the ball. What's he going to get out of this hand position, and when might he use it?
When you're looking for the ball to have a stronger reaction at the back, you're going to notice that the hand position change like this helps to increase the length of skid through the front part of the lane, storing up that energy of that ball. It's trying to drive through this ever-drying lane condition, but we want to store it up because we want to change that angle. We want to create some bigger reaction on the back end. You start noticing your ball is getting a little bit weaker on the back end. This is a great hand position to actually use to keep it stronger on the back end.
All right, Lou, Blake's moved to the right, and he's going to change his hand position, so he's got a weaker hand position in his stance. This is going to give him a different ball motion on the lane, and he's going to use it in certain scenarios. What's the idea here?
Well, the idea is try to create some hold in the lane. You want to keep, up against that oil line, but if it's getting drier, you want to try to maintain that direction. This is a hand position where you actually are looking to get the ball to really tumble more front to back, more end over end, trying to neutralize that reaction from overreacting. And it's a great way to define where the hold is and where the friction is.
So with this weaker hand position, so to speak, we're going to see that the ball speed is going to increase. He's going to have smoother and more controllable angles to the pocket, it sounds like. And he's going to use it primarily maybe on shorter or drier lane conditions. All right, Coach, Blake here has moved to the right, but he's got a loaded hand position or a cupped wrist. What's he going to get out of this?
He's going to increase his rev rate. He's going to try to control that front part of the lane, especially when there's a heavier volume. You need that ball spinning up a lot faster, trying to get it dynamically moving to the pocket. This is a great hand position to get it to really come off that spot in the back end and get it moving.
So would the higher volume of oil probably be the right case if you're looking to increase your rev rate?
Absolutely. You want to get that ball to slow down as fast as possible, so the higher rev rate dynamically makes that core start spinning faster and getting into that good motion, on the back end.
Okay, Coach, Blake's moved to the right side of the lane, and this time he's rotating his axis rotation so it's more aggressive, it's stronger. I'm not sure this is going to be the best case scenario for where he's going to play. What can we see here?
Well, you're going to see that the ball is actually going to create too much reaction here. When the lane's a little drier, especially on a typical house condition, you're going to find that this hand position can kind of sometimes overreact on the back end. I would only probably use this scenario when the volume was just the right amount and we're trying to play maybe a line where it's straighter, but we need the reaction on the back to get it to the pocket. This is actually one where a little bit too much, a little overkill is a little too much.
So this may not be so successful for what he's trying to do. It's really condition specific, lane condition specific. Yeah, so we got to be careful about when to use this, and especially if we're going to use it in this part of the lane.
Yeah, especially in moderation. And you probably load it up quite significantly, but probably backing it off would have been my first approach.
Okay, Coach, we've talked about a lot of things here when we're discussing lane play and lane patterns and ball motion, angles and adjustments here. Give us a quick wrap-up of where we started and kind of where we got to.
You know, when we're changing hand positions, we're influencing the finite adjustments, but those have an influence in really big changes down lane. You know, when we think about changing rotation, we're storing up energy. We're making the ball travel a little longer, but again, storing energy makes it release with more energy at the back, sometimes increasing the entry angle. So we see that bigger back-end motion.
Right. So those hand adjustments and those small moves that you're going to make, they're not going to be the biggest things that will affect ball motion, but they'll have an effect depending on where you're playing and what the lane's giving you. So.
Yeah, and when you're looking for the control, it depends on the environment. Whether you're playing further right, you know, straighter, or whether you're playing further in, there's adjustments that you want to use within those ranges of areas on the lane. Not every adjustment is applicable for that environment.
So it's important as a player not only to know your environment and know what it's giving you, but you got to know your tools and how to make those adapt to what the lane's asking for. So understanding your ball motion, understanding what you can do as a player are all going to help wrap you up and give you great adjustments and great ideas for helping to increase your scores. Okay, Lou, let's talk about tournament arsenal. We'll use Blake. We've got a great bowler. He's really versatile. He's got a lot of options with speed, with his hand positions. He can do a lot of things on the lanes. He's competing regularly on the college circuit for the university. Tell us a little bit about putting together an arsenal, what he's going to do to compete.
Well, you know, like any, you know, up-and-coming bowler, you know, they love to have bowling balls. That's pretty apparent, you know, with kids today. But with Blake's arsenal, what we try to do is control the length of where we want that core to start up. So we look at, you know, the RGs of the ball. We look at whether the ball is going to spin up early in the lane or in the mid part of the lane or really late down the lane. We look at those, you know, type of core constructions first. And then we look at covers and the cover's characteristic. We look for the cover to have more of a flippy type of reaction or more of an archy type of reaction. And then we try to blend those shapes of cover stocks, you know, types, and then we adjust the surfaces accordingly. So in his tournament bag, he may have a bag set up for long, medium, and short, a length, you know, of that travel of that ball, but we'll adjust the covers on them to bring them in or push them down the lane. And then it might be an archy bag. In the flippy bag, we'll do the same exact thing. This way, when he's bowling, he can start with a ball that gives him a nice motion, and then as the lane's transition starts to dry up, we can go to the next motion in the opposite bag. So if we start off with an archy ball, we'll go to the flippy ball next that gets to the same length. This way we can control that back-end reaction.
Yeah, so you're giving him a set of tools, it sounds like, that whenever the lane condition transitions, he doesn't have to do a lot with his physical game, perhaps. He can maybe just change a ball and then go be successful right away.
Yeah, just a small movements is what we really want to be. We want to, you know, control that environment left to right, but what we're really trying to do is manage that control down lane. You know, and when the necessity for the ball to be a little stronger, we can go to it with the core strength, you know, and the cover is already prepped for that.
Yeah, so to add one more piece, we're talking about the bowler's characteristics, we're talking about the equipment and setting that up for him, but also the environment you're going to go compete in. That's going to affect which bags you take, maybe how you set up your stuff, right?
Absolutely. You know, in college bowling, we've almost, you know, labeled it the mystery equipment because we have to select the equipment prior to the actual, you know, knowledge of what the pattern is. So we have to be prepared for everything. So we purposely prep certain things for certain stages of a game based on certain scenarios. So we really, really look at the information of the core and the cover stock, its characteristics, as really being a helpful aid in controlling that environment once we get on it.
Yeah, with a player like Blake, it's easy to see that as versatile as he is, it can be pretty easy to set up a bag for him and give him the great options that he needs to go be competitive. And if you know a little bit about what's coming up with the environment, there's really no way that he's not going to be prepared when it comes time to play.
Absolutely. You know, maintenance is very, very critical for the equipment, and a lot of, you know, polishing, a lot of sanding, a lot of cross-hatching, changing different ways of how we sand the ball, and then just absolutely cleaning in between every shot. That's important.
Yeah, the maintenance is going to make a big difference from shot to shot, especially throughout the length of the competition. So be prepared, have all your tools together, make sure your players are aware of what they need, and put together the best arsenal you can for your players to be successful. Okay, so we've got a lot of option when it comes to equipment. We've talked about hand positions, and sometimes players are a little limited in what they can do. Let's talk about equipment, maybe some options that players can use to take away some of the liabilities they have in their physical game. What do we got in front of us here?
Well, we've got 3 different bowling balls types. We've got a shiny pearlized ball where the cover stock is ultra high gloss. We've got a medium textured type of bowling ball. And we've got the very surface type of reactive bowling ball. Each one of these has a different grade of force as it interacts with the oil environment on the lane. You'll find that this type of ball tends to travel a little bit longer because of the type of cover stock. This one here with the dull surface tends to grab the earliest. Right. You know, it's got the pore structure a little bit more wider. Hence, it's going to dig into the volume of oil in that surface, you know, whether it be wood or synthetic, it's going to bite into it pretty heavily.
The cover stock's immediately going to give us a speed change. So if we have a liability in speed one way or the other, then the cover stock choice is going to help us either keep speed or lose speed one way or the other.
Yeah, it really regulates the amount of energy as to what the bowler imparts to from their physical game. It allows that energy to be controlled, really front to back down the lane, right. You know, and then that's the cover stock. Then you've got the nucleuses inside, the cores. And these cores come in many different arrays and different ways of spinning up and gyrating based on the bowler's revolution and the rev rate amount from low to medium to high. You know, so all these combinations with all these different cover stock ranges can produce a very wide array of motions on a lane.
Yeah, so if you're limited physically in one area, there's probably an option you can get to with your Pro Shop operator that'll help make up for some of the liability that you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they say that every year on an average, there's about 50 different motions that you can purchase from almost every manufacturer's catalogs. You know, take a look at all their inventory of bowling balls, and you can kind of, you know, pick and choose a very wide array, kind of like golf clubs. You know, from the driver to the putter, you've got a lot of options. Bowling, you have a lot of options too.
Let's add a little detail to this. Now, if I'm a player, and we touched on hand positions, if I'm a player that's unable to maybe increase my axis rotation, we talked about getting your hand to the side of the ball more and getting the ball to go longer, I'm probably going to steer myself toward a shinier ball or maybe something that's going to go longer for me. So if I can't get there, this equipment's going to help me get there.
It's going to help you travel down the lane easier. It's going to promote that energy release more deeper down the lane, closer to the pins. Hence, we see a more sharper change of direction, you know, with that type of energy, versus something that just releases very soon, very early.
Yeah, and you'll want options regarding how your physical game is. You'll want options on either side of the spectrum based on who you are. And you'll want a variety of those when you go either to a league, to a competition, whatever you're going to go compete in.
Yeah, like you pick prime example, the USBC Open Championships are coming up pretty soon. And, you know, a lot of people go with the approach of, hey, I'm just going to use the balls that I use for a league. And here you're bowling on a very competitive environment, medium volume, you know, conditioner, medium length, but it's still challenging. We need those options in our bag. So we don't just want to go with our favorite league ball. We want to go with something that maybe can start the day on the fresh condition. And then as the lane transitions and changes, we're going to need something else.
Yeah, and like I said, depending on which type of player you are, say you, like we said, you may be limited in your hand rotations and what you can do, so a piece of equipment can help do that. Even the layout, you're going to work with a Pro Shop professional to help modify what you're looking for and help enhance what these can do for you. How important is the layout when it comes to helping identify what the equipment's going to do?
Layout's very important. You know, depending on where our physical abilities have, we can have the layout influence how these balls start spinning up. We can get them to spin up very soon if we need that out of our physical game, where we need the ball revving up as quickly as possible, or we can get the layout to delay that energy, get it to push further. So many different options, from pin up to pin down to pin closer to your axis to pin further away from our axis. All these different combinations help to change that energy release on the lane.
So with a wide variety of options, it really shouldn't be difficult for any player to find a versatile arsenal when it comes down to getting prepared for whatever they're going to go compete in.
Absolutely. You know, and then obviously we can also change them too. That's the beauty about bowling balls. There's optional, you know, surface changes that you could do prior to bowling. Still legal to do while in practice. And even some tournaments in between games, you can change the surface when specific to that environment. But the big thing mostly is that really every bowler should really try to learn more about the versatility range. You know, one thing that I tell all my customers when they come to a Pro Shop is that really the manufacturer has no idea who's going to buy the ball, how they apply their physical ability to that bowling ball. So really, it's up to them to have a relationship with the pro shop operator on learning what the surfaces can do. You know, so change them up. Change them often and change them back.
Yeah, exactly. They're definitely versatile. You can do a lot of different things with them. And if you fall in love with that one surface that's out of the box and you can't get it right back to that exact surface, you may want to start before you get it on the lanes out of the box with a new surface. That way you can always get it back to that same condition. So we've got options. We know we've got plenty of bowler options. We've got plenty of equipment options. If we're in an environment where we're leaving maybe a 2-pin, and we've tried all the hand positions that our players are able to do. What kind of equipment things can help us change the dynamic so we can get the 2-pin out of that rack on our first ball?
Well, obviously the bowlers, has resorted to trying to make some physical changes, and obviously ran out of options. So equipment obviously is a change. We need something different. So we're looking for conservation of energy. We're looking for the ball to possibly travel a little bit longer down the lane, storing up some more energy so that it can change the direction a little bit stronger. So probably a weaker core, maybe a little weaker cover, it's shinier. That'll help travel it down the lane. But hence, if the environment's fresh and he's still leaving 2 pins, there's always 2 scenarios here. We might have to go with a stronger cover to get it to bite in. So it depends on where we're at in the middle of the game. Whether it's the beginning of the game or after the game when we're leaving that 2-pin. Right. There's always a different theories behind why we leave that pesky corner pin.
Yeah, same scenario like you're saying for the 10-pin. If the ball's coming in a little behind the pocket and we need to do something to change when it hooks or when it doesn't hook on the lane, equipment's a lot of time our first choice when it comes to that. And we want the stronger ball to actually read the front or read the lane sooner or start hooking sooner, so to speak, where we want the shinier equipment to go longer down the lane to be more angular.
More angular, yeah, absolutely. Those necessities are all dependent on basically, what we do physically, and then where we're at in the game, and what that energy looks like. In the end, ultimately, what we're looking for is good control of that environment, at the break point down lane, and having the right angle to go through the pin deck. That's how we control the pocket. The perfect strike, the ball wiggling through the pin deck, through the 1-3 or the 1-2 going through it. So it's about what ball at what time and where we're at.
Yeah, some of the leaves we even saw earlier when we talked about where the ball was positioned on the pocket as it's going in, we saw some high leaves, the 4-pin or the 4-7. So our ball's actually maybe reading too soon and too early, or it's too strong or too angular across the back of the lane. Again, we change our equipment, and based on the ball maybe reading too early, we may need a ball that gets longer down the lane, so a shinier cover, maybe a little weaker layout, depending on what our bowler's abilities are, and will get us to a better position at the pocket so that we're getting those 4 pins and 7 pins out of the way or avoiding those splits.
Yes, absolutely. Obviously our options are, the ball's hooking too much. We want to obviously move more into the oil. That's first, physically. But if the gamut, if our options are run out, then we have to definitely look at the equipment, and look at, okay, what's the weakest option here? Because too much energy is, obviously it gets out of control at a certain point. So we're looking for weaker pins possibly, or, shinier cover, or just weaker core construction. And these are things that help control that environment. As the lanes dries up and things start to run high, we're also getting closer and closer to the pocket. So we got to be able to control that energy because it's wild on the back.
Plenty of tools with the physical game with our players, plenty of options when it comes to equipment. Sometimes the confusion can get a little bit complicated if you're not careful, but knowing yourself, knowing your equipment, knowing what you need, and talking with your coaches and your pro shop professionals, it'll be easy choices down the road to help figure out what the right choices are going to be on the lanes. Okay, Lou, so let's talk about lane play, transition. Depletion really is what's happening. We're losing oil on the lanes, and it's changing every single shot. What are we looking at, and what's actually happening out there?
As we're bowling, we've got these high-performance bowling balls. They're like magic erasers on the lane. They basically, every revolution, the flaring properties of these bowling balls are constantly pulling oil out of the lane. Every foot, every inch, every travel going down the lane. Not only you, but your opponents, your teammates. Everybody's helping to pull the oil off of the lane. So transition is happening at a much greater rate these days. And we've got to be in tune with it. We've got to be adjusting to it constantly. And if we're not, well, we kind of know what the game looks like.
safe to say that every shot's changing the lane condition. So you're never really bowling on the same lane condition 2 shots in a row, much less 2 games or 2 tournaments in a row. It's constantly changing. Now, we hear sometimes people reference the lane changing, but they think it's carrying down or something's happening with the lane getting pushed down, or the oil getting pushed down the lane. What's actually happening there?
Well, years ago, the idea of carry down, the word, it was applied by the technology that we were using. Plastic balls, urethane balls, really non-flaring balls of its time. And that helped to, kind of like a snowplow, pushing that oil further and further away from the front part and redepositing it at the back end. But today, with flaring technology, and balls, flare vastly, a great amount, some 6-7 inches in the amounts, that orbit of that ball is constantly pulling it away. So as a ball makes one revolution, it finds a new track, a new orbit. And that original orbit is no longer touching the lane. So it's impossible for the oil to get redeposited. So it's no longer called what we consider carry down. It's actually lane breakdown. So that's happening.
Yeah, so we're losing the transition of oil from the front to the back of the lane as much as we're actually just moving oil out of the front of the lane. And where most ball reaction gets lost down lane, we're not seeing as much angle or as much shape. It's not because we're seeing more oil down lane as much as we're losing more oil from the front of the lane and we don't have the same shape down lane.
Absolutely. These bowling balls require a certain amount of stored energy. So we have to have a certain amount of oil in the front part of the lane to store up the energy for it to travel and then release that energy at the right time for it to then make the turn. But if that oil is no longer there or it's happening too soon, the energy is gone. So by the time it gets to that distance where we're used to seeing a curve, it no longer has the energy to make the turn around it. So it's like driving your car, and you're on a banked turn, and then you just turn off the ignition. Well, you lose power steering, you lose capability of guiding the car or vehicle around the turn. It becomes very difficult to navigate around it. Bowling balls are really no different.
And that's where we have to change. We got to change equipment. We got to change our adjustments on the back of the approach so that we're adapting to that ever-changing lane environment all the time.
Yeah, and that track or that area on the lane is very susceptible to all the surfaces that we use, how aggressive the surface is, and that's instinctive. Of if the lanes are oily, bowlers now they're going to use a lot more surface, so they're going to sand the bowling balls or a deeper grit. And that grade of, surface pulls the oil even faster off the lane. So it's happening every shot after shot.
Yeah, so it's going to be important as a bowler to maintain your equipment to make sure you're prepared, but also understand that as that lane's changing shot to shot, you've got to be prepared with either an adjustment back here or an equipment change or some kind of adjustment so that as that lane oil goes away or gets removed, you have to be prepared to be successful getting your ball back to the pocket in whatever method you choose.
Yeah, you can experience the lane going from a very wet condition to a very medium to dry condition within 3 games. It just happens with the technology that's available to us nowadays.
So keep an eye out. Make sure that as you're going through adjustments and understanding as the lane transitions and moves, that you're prepared to tackle those ever-changing lane conditions.